Hey class, it is Mrs. Gilling back here, and we are going to go over some stuff for Unit 2, a brief overview about the things you're going to be learning about crimes against people. But before we do that, I've got something that I like to call the joke of the unit. You ready for it? Here you go. So this one's a cartoon for you. It's a courtroom situation. The judge is about to ask the jury what the verdict is, and here goes. Here's the judge. On the count of texting while driving, how do you find the defendant? And the jury says, huh? Because they're all looking at their cell phones. So isn't that a pretty common thing in today's world, the technology kind of interfering with the things that we're supposed to be doing? But I found this to be very appropriate for the things we're learning about in this unit because we're learning about crimes. Texting while driving just so happens to be a crime that somebody could commit and be charged with. So there's your joke of the unit. Hopefully you thought that was pretty funny. I kind of liked that one. So let's jump into an overview of the things you'll be learning about. They're not going to cover everything you'll be learning about this unit, but some of the bigger things just to get your mind kind of thinking about everything and help you see what's important for you to be paying attention to. So first of all, criminal law. What is criminal law? Most crimes require a guilty act and a guilty state of mind in order for something to be considered a crime. What does that mean? Like, those are some big words, those are some crazy words. What does it mean to have a guilty mind? What's a guilty act? So here's a little more of an explanation. So a guilty mind and a guilty act is something that was done illegally. So you did something wrong, something that was against the law, something you weren't supposed to do, and you did it intentionally. So you meant to do it knowingly, you knew what you were doing, you knew it was wrong, or willingly. You weren't forced to do it. It's something that you just said, yeah, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and break that law. So in order for someone to be a crime, it's done illegally and it's done on purpose. You meant to do it. Strict liability offenses, though, they do not require a guilty mind. So here's an example of a strict liability offense. Selling alcohol to a minor, even if you didn't know they were minors. You didn't necessarily have a guilty mind because you didn't know they were minors, but it was still your obligation as the person working at the liquor store or whatever store it was to check and get their information to see whether they were a minor or not. So you still did something illegally. You had liability within that position to check, and so that situation, something's still a crime, even if they didn't necessarily have that guilty mind. Crimes exist at the state level, the federal level, and both. So for instance, you could commit a crime that was just a state crime. Maybe they have crimes about, for instance, in Idaho, it's illegal to talk on your phone while you're driving, and that's something that you could get in trouble with in the local level, but you wouldn't necessarily get in trouble at a federal level for that because it's not a federally across the whole United States illegal to talk on your phone while driving. And technically it's not considered a crime, it's an infraction, but that's something we can get to another time. But something on the federal level could be murder. Murder is something that federally it's against the law. It's against the law in every state. There's big time laws against not doing that. It can also be both. So murder is also an example of something that you can get in trouble with it from the federal government. You can also get in trouble with it in the state government. So you can be charged with it on both sides there. An example, which is something you've probably seen in the news recently, of one that may be considered federally illegal and not state illegal, and this is something that's kind of new. It's something I hadn't seen a lot in when I was growing up, but the use of marijuana. So in the state of Oregon, for instance, it's legal to use marijuana and to sell marijuana, but federally, it's illegal. So if you were in Oregon and a state trooper were to pull you over and you had some marijuana, you may not get arrested. But if you were to walk into a federal building like a courthouse or something like that, and you had the marijuana on you, then you could get arrested and you could get in trouble because federally that is illegal. It's something that you cannot do. So like I said, crimes, you can be in trouble at the state level, the federal level, and both. Crimes are either felonies or misdemeanors. So a felony is a big crime. It's a much more serious offense, and the penalty for a felony is potential imprisonment for more than a year. So that's kind of how you classify whether something's a felony or a misdemeanor. If it's something that you can go to jail for more than a year, then it's a felony. If it's something that you could go to jail for only less than a year, it's a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor is just a much less serious crime. When a crime is committed, if you don't necessarily have to commit the crime itself to get in trouble. If you help to commit that crime, then you can be charged as well. So a principal is someone who commits the crime. They're the person that actually goes and follows through with something. An accomplice is somebody who helps the principal commit a crime. An example of this is, let's say two people get together and they decide, you know what, we're going to rob a bank. One person drives the car to the bank and waits for the guy to get out, and the other guy goes into the bank and robs it. The one that actually robbed the bank, he's the principal. The one that drove the getaway car, he's the one who's the accomplice. He's the one that helps. You both get to be charged in a situation like that. Both things are considered crimes. And the last part of this section is about preliminary crimes. So you can be charged with a crime even if you didn't commit the crime itself. It's called an inchoate offense. It's when you planned a crime, you thought of a crime, you wanted to commit this crime, you started the planning process, but you didn't follow through. You can be punished even if the crime never occurred. Some examples of these are solicitation, attempt, and conspiracy. And you'll learn a little more in detail what each of those are as you do your textbook readings. But solicitation is when you offer to have somebody else do something for you. So let's say, you want to get some money from someone, you want to steal some money, but you don't want to do it yourself. So you go up to a person, you say, hey, I'll give you $5 if you go steal $100 from so-and-so. That's called solicitation. You're trying to get them to commit a crime for you. And that you can get in trouble just as if you committed the crime yourself. Attempt is if you tried to do something but you failed. So you've probably seen Law and Order and they talk about attempted murder when somebody went and they tried to take a life of someone else but they were unsuccessful. You still get in trouble for trying to do that. You still be charged. And then conspiracy is the planning process. You both get together, maybe with somebody else, and you're planning to commit a crime, but something happens, that crime doesn't actually happen. You can still be in trouble for the thought process, the getting together and actually plotting that crime. So a crime itself doesn't actually have to happen in order for you to be charged. If you're so deep in the planning process, then that's considered a crime. So there's some different categories of crimes. There's crimes against the person, there's crimes against property. The crimes against the person are very serious offenses. These include things like homicide, kidnapping, assault, battery, robbery, and rape. So very serious crimes, and they're crimes that they'll go into greater detail what each of them mean in the reading. They are associated with harsh penalties. And that means, you're going to go to jail for a long time. You're going to have heavy fines. It's not a slap on the wrist kind of things. These crimes against the person are very serious. And there's various levels of the crimes, and they're in place to protect the defendant from an overly harsh penalty. So an example of that would be murder. If you've looked at it, they have different degrees. Murder in the first degree, second degree, third degree. They do that because they're not going to charge somebody that in a spur of a moment got in a fight because someone ticked them off and they punched someone and they end up falling back, hitting their head and passing away. They're not going to charge them as seriously as somebody that spent weeks plotting and planning and coming with all the ideas of how to harm someone and kill them. That's a much more serious offense. Same thing with like a robbery. If you were just someone that was poor down your luck, all of a sudden you saw someone that had their wallet hanging out and you just took it without really thinking, you're not going to be charged as seriously as somebody that plotted that whole thing. They're like, all right, I'm going to go into a house and I'm going to rob the house of all of the jewelry. The second situation is much more serious, so you get a much more harsher penalty. There's also crimes against property. So this includes crimes in which property is destroyed, and a couple examples of that are arson, when you burn down a house on purpose, and vandalism, when you take spray paint and you go and spray it all over a house. That's an example of a crime against property. There's also crimes in which property is taken against the will of the owner. This includes larceny, embezzlement, robbery, extortion, burglary, forgery, and receiving stolen property. So it's not just crimes against people, there's crimes against property as well. And there's also cyber crimes, and this is something that as technology becomes more and more advanced, we have much more cyber crimes. You've probably seen a lot of things like that in the news. You have people that hack into bank account information and they steal bank account information. You have identity theft. These are all examples of cyber crimes, and that's why you have all these task forces coming together to try and prevent this. Because as people learn more about technology, their means of stealing things online and causing damage in the cyber world are increasing at a rapid rate. So some cyber crimes include identity theft and even music piracy. So it's illegal to go and steal someone's music online, that sort of thing. That's a cyber crime. And those are things, like I said, that are just growing at a rapid pace. So here's some defenses that people might have if they were charged with a crime. So, they get arrested, they go to court, and they say, hey, this is the reason why I did this, or maybe I didn't do it. So these are the type of defenses that someone might have in criminal law. So first of all, they could say that no crime has been committed. An example of this is, let's say somebody got pulled over and the officer, they had a gun. In Idaho, you don't have to have a concealed carry permit, but in a lot of states you do. So let's say they got pulled over and the officer says, whoa, you have a concealed weapon. And they charge them because of having that concealed weapon. They could go to court and show that they have documentation to have that weapon, that they have a concealed weapon permit. If they can show that documentation, their defense is saying, hey, I didn't commit a crime. I had a permit to have that gun. It was okay. That's the first defense, when you prove that, hey, no crime was actually committed here. I was charged with something that I didn't do. Another defense is that the defendant did not commit the crime. So this could be an example of maybe a stolen identity. Maybe you were charged with a crime, but it was something that you didn't actually do. Maybe somebody was acting like you and they committed the crime themselves. So the crime was still committed, but it wasn't you that did it. The third one is the defendant committed the act, but it was excusable or justifiable. You've probably heard of self-defense. This is where that kind of comes in. Yeah, maybe you shoved someone, but maybe it's because they were in your face and they were going to hurt your family, so you used a justifiable amount of force to have them back up. That's an excuse somebody might use. The last one is that the defendant committed the act, but it is not criminally responsible. So maybe you've heard of the insanity defense before, the insanity plea. This is a defense that people might use. They might say, you know what, I did commit the crime, but I wasn't in the right state of mind when I did it. It could also say that they were under the influence of alcohol, and that was what caused them to commit the crime. So maybe they weren't criminally responsible in that situation. And this defense doesn't always work. It's not always accurate, but it's a defense that people can use. Now, the last thing you're going to learn about in the unit is juvenile justice. And I have included a lot here because their textbook readings, they go into pretty good detail, but I did want to point a couple of things out to you here. First of all, delinquent offenders are considered youths who have committed acts that would be crimes if committed by adults under federal, state, or local laws. So if it's a crime that an adult committed and somebody under the age of 18 commits that crime, then you're considered a delinquent offender. You can also, though, be called a status offender. And a status offender is a youth who commits a crime or an act that would not be crimes if committed by adults. So for an example of this, if you run away from home as an adult, that's not a crime. You can run away from home. That's totally fine. But if you run away from home as a juvenile, then that's considered a crime. Same thing with if you're smoking. If you're over the legal age, then smoking is not a crime. But if you're under the legal age, then it's considered a crime. So you'd be a status offender. And that's what I got for you. That's kind of your brief overview of what you're going to be learning about in this unit. Hopefully it was helpful for you. It kind of gave you an idea, maybe cleared a few things up for you. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, call me, come to my live office hour, and I'll do whatever I can to help you out there. But other than that, I'd love for you now to go complete your video assignment, answer those questions so you can get some credit for watching this video, and we will catch up with you guys next time. Have a good week.